Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're venturing into the world of Torvosaurus, that fearsome theropod dinosaur from the late Jurassic.
Ah, yes, the savage lizard.
Exactly. The name itself hints at its significance, and we've gathered some fascinating scientific sources to, unpack just what made this predator so remarkable. Our mission today is to distill the essential knowledge, offering you a clear and engaging understanding of Torvosaurus. We'll cover how it's classified, the discovery stories,
Which are quite something.
and its global presence. We're talking fossils from North America, Europe, Portugal, Germany, maybe even England and Spain.
And potentially Africa and South America, too. Tanzania, Uruguay. The picture's gotten much bigger recently.
Right. Okay, let's begin to unravel this story.
It's quite telling that the name, Torvosaurus, conjures such a vivid image. As you mentioned, it combines the Latin torvus, meaning savage,
Savage, yeah.
with the Greek sauros for lizard. And the species names follow suit. Torvosaurus tanneri honors Nathan Eldon Tanner. And the second one, T. Gurney. Well, that's a nod to James Gurney.
Ah, the Denatopia creator. That's neat.
It is, isn't it? It sort of sets the stage for this formidable creature we're discussing.
Absolutely. And placing it scientifically, it's very specific. Domain Eukaryota, kingdom Animalia, all the way down to genus Torvosaurus.
Nestled within Megalosauridae.
Right, in the Megalosaurinae subfamily. So a particular branch of theropods. And it lived, what, middle to late Jurassic?
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
About 165 to 148 million years ago. Calovian to Tithonian stages.
Got it. Now, I've seen other names sometimes linked to it. Brontoraptor and Edmarca Rex.
Ah, yes. Those pop up. Brontoraptor is generally considered what we call a nomen nudum, basically, not formally described properly. Edmarca Rex, though,
That was based on some big bones, wasn't it?
very big, yes. From Como Bluff. The current thinking is that both Brontoraptor and Edmarca Rex likely represent Torvosaurus tanneri, maybe just particularly large individuals or variations.
So synonyms, potentially?
Potentially, yes. But it highlights something crucial in paleontology. Our understanding evolves. These need, proper reevaluation and publication to be certain.
Always more work to do. Okay, so the actual first Torvosaurus discovery. That goes way back, doesn't it?
It does. Elmer Riggs, Wyoming, 1899, found some foot and hand bones.
1899, wow.
Yeah, but they weren't recognized as Torvosaurus then. They sort of got lost in collections, rediscovered around 2010, and only formally assigned to T. tanneri in 2014.
A century-long wait. That's incredible.
It really is. And this idea of a global Torvosaurus, that's one of the really intriguing parts. Take the Tanzanian
It's
find.
the tooth from 1920.
That's the one. Janisch found it. Initially called Megalosaurus ingens. Then it bounced around maybe a Carcharodontosaurid. But then, in 2020, researchers suggested it could be Torvosaurus, maybe even its own species, Torvosaurus ingens.
Which connects to potential South American finds.
Exactly. Teeth from Uruguay show similarities to this Tanzanian material. So you start wondering, could this animal, or something very close, have spanned continents?
That's a huge range.
It is. But, and this is important, classifying just from teeth is tricky.
Convergent evolution, you mean?
Yeah.
Similar shapes developing independently.
Precisely. So while it's suggestive, really compelling evidence would need more skeletal material. Teeth alone can be, well, a bit ambiguous at the genus level sometimes, as Rauhut and others pointed out.
Understood. Need more bones. Okay, jumping ahead. 1971, Colorado. Vivian Jones finds a giant thumb claw.
And that was the key. It led Jim Jensen and Ken Statman to the Dry Mesa Quarry from 1972 onwards.
Which yielded a lot of Torvosaurus, right? Alongside Supersaurus.
Abundant material, yes. The holotype for T. tanneri, BYU 2002, comes from their upper and lower arm bones.
The defining specimen.
Correct. And paratypes, other supporting fossils, gave us parts of the back, hip, hand bones from at least 3 individuals.
But some parts were missing initially.
Yeah, the shoulder girdle and the femur, the thigh bone, weren't among those first Dry Mesa finds.
Okay. And then Como Bluff again, 1992. That's where Edmarca Rex and Brontoraptor came from.
That's right. Those finds generated a lot of buzz, suggesting something potentially rivaling T-Rex in size, which,
Yeah.
well, that gets attention.
I bet. But as you said, probably larger T. tanneri.
That's the consensus view currently, yeah.
Yeah.
Though still awaiting that detailed scientific comparison to be formally published, it shows how interpretations can shift as we learn more.
For sure. Then there's Elvis.
Ah, Elvis, the Torvosaurus.
Good one.
Found in 2012, Colorado's Skull Creek Quarry.
And it's the most complete one found so far.
By a good margin. about 55% complete. It's incredibly valuable. And you can actually see it. It's mounted in Cincinnati.
Oh, fantastic. That really helps visualize the animal.
It does. Seeing a largely complete skeleton gives you a much better sense of its proportions and sheer scale than just fragments.
Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic. Portugal, fossils there were a bit back and forth initially. Torvosaurus sp, then maybe Tannery, then sp again.
Exactly. There was some uncertainty for a while. Identified as Torvosaurus sp in 2000, tentatively linked to Tannery in 2006, but then back to just Torvosaurus sp in 2012, until 2014. That's when the Portuguese material, based on a really nice maxilla, the upper jawbone, was formally named as a new species, Torvosaurus guernii.
And that's a big deal for Europe, right?
Huge deal. It's the largest named theropod currently known from Europe, a real top predator for its time there.
And there might be even bigger ones suggested by finds in Spain.
There's a large, isolated vertebra from Spain, yes. It could be Torvosaurus, maybe guernii, maybe something closely related. It hints that the European lineage might have reached even larger sizes.
The plot thickens, and the global picture keeps expanding. Uruguay, 2020.
A tooth described as a new, unnamed Torvosaurus species, cementing that South American presence.
And the Tanzanian material finally got assigned, too.
Yes, in the same year, 2020, that Megalosaurus ingens material was formally placed within Torvosaurus. So you have North America, Europe, potentially Africa, and South America. Quite the distribution.
In Germany, that find pushed the timeline back.
It did. A fragmentary maxilla from the Middle Calovian stage, described in 2020. That's the oldest record we have for the genus Torvosaurus.
Which suggests?
It suggests that maybe the whole Megalosaurinae subfamily, Torvosaurus' group, might have originated or at least diversified significantly in Europe during the Middle Jurassic, before spreading elsewhere.
Interesting. And finally, maybe England, too.
Some potential fragments, yes. From the Kimmeridge clay, a tibia piece and a maxilla fragment. Still tentative, but it adds to that picture of a widespread presence.
Okay, so let's talk size and build. Clearly a large predator. How did the two main species compare?
Well, T. Tannery from North America, the estimates generally put it around 9 meters long, so about 30 feet. Weight-wise, maybe 2 to 2.4 metric tons.
Respectable size.
Definitely. But then T. guernii in Europe seems to have been larger, possibly up to 10 meters, that's 33 feet, and weighing maybe 4 to 5 metric tons.
Wow, significantly heavier.
Yeah, making it the largest known terrestrial carnivore in Europe during the late Jurassic. That size difference is interesting, maybe different prey availability or ecological pressures between the continents.
And what about those claims of even bigger tannery based on Edmarca and Brontoraptor? Up to 12 meters.
Those estimates are out there, yeah, suggesting lengths up to maybe 39 feet and weights over 4 tons. But again, as we discussed, without a detailed published analysis confirming those remains belong to T. tannery and aren't just unusually large individuals or slightly different anatomically, those larger sizes remain a bit more speculative.
Gotcha. Need that formal study. Okay, let's get into the skull. What did it look like?
It was quite distinct, elongated, fairly narrow. It had that characteristic kink in the snout profile, just above the nostrils.
Okay, I think I can picture that.
And the teeth at the very front, the premaxillary teeth, 3 of them, somewhat flattened and pointing slightly outwards. Then the main upper jawbone, the maxilla, was tall and held at least 11 long blade-like teeth.
Nasty. What about openings in the skull?
The antorbital fenestra, the hole in front of the eye, was actually relatively short compared to some other big theropods, and it had a distinct lacrimal horn, a bony bump, just above the eye socket.
Common in theropods, the horns, but maybe distinctive here.
The overall shape and placement, yes. The eye socket itself was tall, kind of pointed at the bottom. The cheekbone, the jugal, was long and thin. And there's a unique tear-shaped depression on the quadrate bone, back near the jaw joint. Little details like these help tell it apart.
And the rest of the body? Neck. Arms.
The neck vertebrae and the front part of the back had tall, wide neural spines. That suggests a pretty stiff, strong neck. The arms were powerful, definitely robust, but maybe a bit short proportionally for its overall size.
And the big thumb claw, was it especially huge?
It was large, certainly, but whether it was significantly more enlarged compared to, say, Megalosaurus is still a bit uncertain based on the fossils we have. The pelvis, though, was massively built, quite similar to Megalosaurus, with fused pubic bones and ischia built for power and supporting that weight.
Okay, so comparing Gurney and Tannery again. Besides size, what tells them apart? You mentioned tooth count might not be reliable.
Yeah, the initial idea was Gurney had fewer teeth, maybe less than 11 compared to Tannery's 11 or more. but that might just be preservation, how the fossils were found.
So what is a reliable difference?
The internal structure of the maxilla seems key, things like the shape of the maxillary medial wall and how the interdental plates, the bony bits between the teeth, are formed. Subtle, but distinct.
And the German find, different how?
Mainly by its age, it's much older, Middle Colovian, and there are a few minor morphological differences in the fragment that's preserved, separating it from the later species.
Okay, let's place Torvosaurus on the big evolutionary tree. Systematics. We said Megalosauridae.
Firmly within Megalosauridae, yes.
Mhm.
That's the current consensus. A major family of large theropods. Understanding this helps us see where it fits in the grand scheme of dinosaur evolution.
It wasn't always placed there, though.
No, earlier on, there were other ideas, sometimes put in Carnosauria, which used to be a broader, more catch-all group. Some suggested it might be a basal, an early Spinosauroid.
Like an early relative of Spinosaurus.
Kinda, yeah. Or even just a basal Titanoran, that huge group that includes most theropods like Allosaurs, Tyrannosaurs, birds. But more recent, rigorous phylogenetic analyses.
Those family tree studies based on shared features.
Exactly. They consistently place it squarely within Megalosauridae.
What about that separate family Jensen proposed, Torvosauridae?
Right, back in 1985. Some supported it initially, but it's generally seen as redundant now because Torvosaurus is just so closely related to Megalosaurus. They're considered sister taxa within the subfamily Megalosaurinae.
So, making a whole family just for Torvosaurus isn't really necessary if it fits neatly beside Megalosaurus.
Pretty much, however. The name Torvosauridae could become useful if, for some reason, Megalosaurus itself was ever declared a nomen dubium.
Meaning its original fossils are too scrappy to define the genus properly.
Exactly. If that happened, we might need Torvosauridae to house Torvosaurus and its closest relatives, clearly. But for now, Megalosauridae works.
Okay. And within Megalosauridae, is Torvosaurus seen as more advanced or derived than Megalosaurus?
That seems to be the case, yes. Megalosauridae itself is a relatively early branch of the Tetanari, but Torvosaurus shows some features considered a bit more derived than what we see in Megalosaurus. And the whole family, Megalosauridae, is thought to be closely related to the Spinosauridae.
The sail-backed, often fish-eating ones. Interesting connection. You mentioned a cladogram earlier. Maybe explain that for listeners.
Sure, a cladogram is just a branching diagram, like a family tree, showing hypothesized evolutionary relationships. The one from Carano, Benson, and Sampson's 2012 study clearly shows Torvosaurus nested within Megalosauridae, right next to Megalosaurus.
Meaning they share a recent common ancestor.
More recent than either does with other dinosaurs in that analysis, yes. They are depicted as sister groups on that particular tree.
And what specific features did Carano's team use to define Torvosaurus within that group? What makes it distinct?
They highlighted several key anatomical traits. Let's see, a very shallow fossa or depression on maxilla. And importantly, it lacks that extra hole, the fenestra maxillaris, seen in some theropods. Also, fused interdental plates between the teeth sockets, expanded air sacs, or pneumatic fossa in the vertebrae of the rear, back, and front tail. A strongly fused pelvic structure, the puboischiatic plate.
Built solid.
Very solid. Also a specific shape to the end of the ischium bone in the pelvis, and neck vertebrae that are opisthosceles concave at the back, with a distinct flat rim around the socket, and an extra opening, a transverse fenestra, in the neural arch of the back vertebrae. Lots of technical details, but they add up to define the genus.
Absolutely crucial for paleontologists. Okay, moving to something really amazing, fossil eggs, attributed to Torvosaurus.
Yes. This discovery in Portugal's Lorena Formation is incredibly significant. We're talking crushed eggs, but with embryonic material inside.
Wow, actual embryos.
Actual embryonic bones, yes. And this is huge because, well, several reasons. They're the most primitive, the most basal theropod embryos ever found.
The oldest type known.
Not necessarily oldest in age, but representing the earliest branching group of theropods for which we have embryos. And they're the only basal theropod embryos known, period. Finding eggs and embryos together is also quite rare.
What do the eggs themselves tell us? The shells.
They showed, for the first time clearly, that these basal theropods had a single-layered eggshell structure, different from some later dinosaurs.
Interesting.
And it allowed researchers to link this specific eggshell type directly to Torvosaurus skeletal remains found nearby, strengthening the ID. Plus, the shells were very porous.
Meaning?
High porosity suggests the eggs were likely buried, maybe in sand or soil, for incubation. Much like sea turtles do today, the pores allow for gas exchange when buried.
Fascinating glimpse into behavior. Now, it's strange that in the Morrison Formation in North America, where we find lots of adult Torvosaurus, we don't seem to find juveniles. Why might that be?
That's a good question, and there are a few hypotheses. One is preservation bias. The Morrison might just preserve big, robust bones better than small, delicate juvenile ones.
Makes sense.
Or maybe young Torvosaurus live somewhere else. Different habitats, different ecological niches than the adults where fossils didn't form as easily.
Or they just didn't survive long.
Oh, that's another possibility.
Yeah.
High juvenile mortality due to predation, perhaps. Fewer reaching adulthood means fewer juvenile fossils. There's also the idea of type B1 survivorship. Maybe mortality rates went up after they reached maturity, leading to more adult fossils.
Counterintuitive.
A bit. And finally, maybe we have found juvenile remains, but they've been misidentified as smaller theropod species because young dinosaurs can look quite different from adults.
Lots of possibilities. Okay, let's paint a picture of their world. Paleoecology, the dry mesa quarry in Colorado. What was that like?
Late Jurassic dry mesa. Think rivers flowing into a salty, alkaline lake, lots of wetlands around, part of the big Morrison Formation ecosystem.
Full of famous dinosaurs.
Absolutely. Huge sauropods, Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, plant eaters like Camptosaurus, and other big predators alongside Torvosaurus, notably Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus. Plus, smaller dinos, crocs, pterosaurs, early mammals, a whole complex world.
Okay. And the German site, the oldest one.
That was the Ornithenten Formation, Middle Calovian. It was actually a shallow sea environment, and Torvosaurus, or its earliest relative, lived alongside another large theropod, the Invenator. Multiple big predators even back then.
Portugal, the Larinum Formation, where the eggs were found?
That was coastal, strong marine influence, but with terrestrial environments too. Fauna and flora, quite similar actually to the Morrison. Torvosaurus guernii seems to have been the top dog there.
Speaking.
European Allosaurus species, Ceratosaurus, various sauropods, Stegosaurus, again a diverse, large dinosaur fauna where Torvosaurus held that apex predator role.
And Tanzania and Uruguay, the potential sites.
Tendaguru in Tanzania is thought to be tidal flats, freshwater near the sea. An incredibly rich fauna there. Allosaurus tandicarensis, Veteropristosaurus, another Carcharodontosaur relative, tons of sauropods, ornithischians. Tacuarembó in Uruguay seems more like rivers, streams, lakes. Torvosaurus there, if confirmed, would likely be the top predator, maybe alongside something like Ceratosaurus.
So, a recurring theme. Torvosaurus living alongside other big theropods like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus. How did they all manage?
That's the million-dollar question. Niche partitioning is the likely answer. They probably divided up the resources somehow.
Oh, so different hunting grounds.
Possibly. One idea is that Torvosaurus and Ceratosaurus maybe preferred areas closer to water, maybe more forested habitats, while Allosaurus perhaps was more adapted to the drier, open floodplains.
Any evidence for that?
Some hints. There's a suggestion that allosaurids might have been more common inland, while megalosaurids like Torvosaurus dominated more coastal settings, and in the Morrison, where they overlap.
Yeah.
In those sites, with multiple predator species, Torvosaurus tends to be rarer than Allosaurus, suggesting maybe Allosaurus was better suited to those particular spots, or just more numerous overall in those environments.
Could they have eaten different things too?
Very likely. Different skull shapes, teeth. Allosaurus might have been better at slicing, maybe tackling swifter prey. Torvosaurus, being more robust, perhaps specialized in bringing down or maybe scavenging really large sauropods, breaking open those huge carcasses.
Which might even benefit the smaller predators.
Potentially, yeah. A kind of commensal relationship. Torvosaurus makes the kill. Smaller guys like Allosaurus or Ceratosaurus move in afterwards for scraps.
And there's direct evidence of interaction like bite marks, scavenging.
There is. Bite marks on Allosaurus bones match teeth that could belong to Ceratosaurus or Torvosaurus, indicating scavenging. And then there's the darker side.
Cannibalism.
Evidence from the Mygatmore quarries suggests it. Bite marks on theropod bones, possibly Allosaurus, that seem too large for a typical Allosaurus. Could be an exceptionally big one, or perhaps Torvosaurus was present there too, even if we haven't found its bones at that specific site. It points to a potentially stressed ecosystem in the late Jurassic. Tough times.
Wow. A complex and sometimes brutal world.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating deep dive into Torvosaurus.
Savage lizard, indeed.
We've covered its impressive size, its surprisingly wide global distribution, the ongoing detective work piecing together different species and its evolution.
And its role as a top predator, sharing the landscape with other giants.
Right. And those incredible fossil eggs shedding light on its reproduction. Really amazing stuff.
What's really striking, I think, is how these discoveries from different continents, Germany, Portugal, North America, maybe Africa and South America, are slowly converging. They're painting a much richer, more complete picture of this animal across time and space. It really shows science as a process. Absolutely. And on that thought, here's something for you, our listeners, to ponder. Given this vast geographical range and the varied environments Torvosaurus called home during the Jurassic, what does its story truly tell us about how connected those ancient ecosystems were? And thinking about the fossils still buried, what further secrets, what mysteries might the bones of this magnificent savage lizard still hold for us to discover? Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.